Hey there, folks. Dan Fritter with Calvert Magazine and a weekend update for Bill C-21. This one's not a news update, hence no date. This is something you guys can do, and this is something you guys can do all summer long. Now that Bill C-21 has passed second reading in the Senate, unfortunately, it is headed for the Senate Standing Committee on National Defense, Security and Veterans Affairs, SECD. This is the committee that's going to be studying Bill C-21 in the fall when Parliament returns from the summer break. And that means we have all summer to open a dialogue with the members of this committee with the hopes that the committee doesn't change membership in the fall and start to expose some of the issues around Bill C-21. A lot of them are already probably passably familiar because of some of the speeches by senators like Don Plett that have been raising the issues with Bill C-21. But nonetheless, we as gun owners have an opportunity, because also, too, these senators do represent areas as constituents, to reach out to them and let them know both our thoughts, our feelings on the bill, but also, too, some of the very real issues. And why I say that is because we'll do more of these videos as it goes along. But I looked at the composition for that committee yesterday, and the way it breaks down is effectively, if my count was correct, there are 5 senators on the SECD committee that are members of the Independent Senators Group, which I will talk about in a sec. There are 2 from the Conservative Senators Group. There are 2 from the Progressive Senators Group, which is something you can sort of think of similar to the NDP in the Senate. And then there are 2 that are truly independent senators. The Independent Senators Group is a little bit different than independent senators that sit independently, because the Independent Senators Group is actually the collection of formerly Liberal senators who Justin Trudeau kicked out of the Liberal Party in 2014 when he made a move that said if you are in the Senate, you cannot be a member of the Liberal Party. It was basically a pitch to try and make it look like the Senate was a little bit more nonpartisan than it is, but they are effectively Liberal senators. So there's 5 of them, and obviously more from the rest. The Progressive Senators Group is interesting because they do advance progressive things, and that does generally include gun control and advancing gun control. However, one of the senators from the Progressive Senators Group that is on SECD actually represents the Northwest Territories. And this is incredibly poignant because, as Senator Plett said in his speech before Bill C-21, Canada is a consignatory, we are one of the signatory countries on the UN Declaration of Rights for Indigenous People, or UNDRIP, UNDRIP, as we've heard it referenced numerous times. And that piece of legislation, that very real contract that we have with the United Nations, says that any piece of legislation or policy that may affect Indigenous peoples has to have, the government must consult with Indigenous peoples while crafting this. Obviously, that didn't happen here in the transition from Bill C-21 going from a handgun ban when it was originally consulted on. They do have documentation saying the government did seek consultation with First Nations and Indigenous groups when it first drafted C-21 as a handgun ban. However, it is now one of the largest pieces of gun control in a generation, and that's not my opinion. That's the word of our Minister of Public Safety, Marco Mendicino. There's obviously a very large gap between a handgun transfer ban that allows owners to continue to possess and use them and the largest gun control in a generation. And they never consulted with Indigenous groups before making the amendments that turned this into that. So I think there's a very real opportunity, especially given UNDRIP is very important, especially given one of the senators represents the Northwest Territories, where this is going to be so felt, because especially this legislation and the conjoined Canadian Firearms Advisory Committee recommendations due on August 28th will probably in concert ban every semi-automatic rifle that you can use for hunting, including many that are currently used for hunting. And the problem for example, people in Northwest Territories and other rural areas where access is primarily by boat or plane, it gets very expensive to get products to those areas, if you can get them at all. As we know now, there's still supply chain issues. Getting your hands on things can be difficult. It's very expensive these days. Shipping is going up and up. So you can imagine if a hunter has to replace a gun in southwestern Ontario, they can go to any number of stores, get a gun probably relatively easily. It'll still cost them something. But if you live in Tuktoyaktuk or somewhere up there in the Yukon, Nunavut, Northwest Territory, even Northern Ontario, Northern BC, Northern Alberta, Northern Saskatchewan, these remote regions, if the government tells you that your hunting rifle is no longer legal because it's a semi-automatic, such as C-21 and again the conjoined CFAC recommendations will do, there are regions in this country where a replacement rifle is not readily available, and you will have subsistence hunt. And these are the areas like the Northwest Territories where guns are absolutely a requirement for both subsistence hunting and protection from predators in these remote areas. So you will have a very real situation, and I'm hoping the senator can be made to understand this, that there will be people in Northwest Territories who have to confront the reality of, do they take their gun out and go hunting for the food they need to survive or the protection they need to survive? And in doing so, risk a federal charge? Because the alternative will be they can't use the gun. It has to stay inside the house until it is surrendered to the government or whatever happens to them. And they can't get a replacement. And if they could, maybe they can't afford it because, again, the gun will have to be flown in on a Beaver. That is very expensive, and life is expensive these days. So we have all summer to make these arguments to these senators. And like I said, although there are 5 from the formerly Liberal senators group, the balance of power really lies with the rest who are either conservatives or independents, or even in this case, a progressive senator that they're still more independent than parliamentarians, it should also be noted. Even the independent senators group, formerly Liberal senators group, they're still a little bit more independent, less partisan, less beholden to a party than parliamentarians, because obviously Senate's a lifetime appointment. So nonetheless, there is the expectation that this group, this committee specifically, will be a little bit toothier, will be able to accomplish more. And in my opinion, especially because there was no consultation, there's a very real argument to be made to these senators that it should not be passed. And if it is passed, it should be stripped of pretty much everything that was not included when those consultations were made, namely everything beyond the handgun ban. And I'd love to have that rolled back too, but we have to be realistic and, realistic with what we're telling these senators. So long story short, that's where we're at with this. Also, we're going to be putting form letters out. I referenced in a previous video. There'll be form letters available on Caliber's website, and I'm sure all of the other associations and organizations will have them. We're going to try and get some letters out to retailers as well, just so they can print them out and have them there. It doesn't cost anything to mail them because it's just like anything that you mail government. You just fold it up, put it in an envelope, address it, and drop it in the box. But we should be preparing the same sort of pressure that we put on the Parliamentary Committee on Public Safety with Amendments G4 and G46. This is our opportunity to do the same thing with the Senate, except in this case, we don't have the actual Liberal Party that drafted the legislation working to ramrod things through and limit debate. So there's a lot of opportunity. We got lots of work ahead of us, but we've got lots of time to do it too. So, but this update for this weekend is mostly just to put this on your guys' radar. If you're unfamiliar, there will be links down below where you can see the Senate committee links there. From there you can get to the email addresses and contacts for all of the other senators, so you can contact them. There's a lot of good people on that committee, and I'm hoping it doesn't change the makeup before the fall, because that would kind of suck. But so yeah, get in contact with your senators is what I'm getting at. I hope you guys liked the video. There will be more on this next week as we continue to sort of work to see what we can do with C21 and not give up. So I hope you guys liked the video. I hope you guys are enjoying your weekend off. I will see you guys next week. If you enjoyed it, like, comment, subscribe. As always, I am trying to reply to as many comments as I can. And I really appreciate the subscriptions for everyone. And if you want to support us and what we're doing with all this stuff, or if you want to get a form letter or anything else, there'll be articles on this over at calibermag.ca. And if you want, pick up a magazine subscription. We'll get that out to you next week. We are cutting off the mailing list on Tuesday. So yeah, much love to you guys. Hope you're having a good weekend, and I will see you guys next week.